Ia ngā te awhakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Okay, welcome everybody. Do we have apologies? Is Mayor Sam online this time round, or is he elsewhere? Okay, so, well, potentially apologies, we're not sure. Okay, everybody else present? Nice. So next we've got minutes. Just wondering if anybody, I'd take them as read unless there's any discussions or matters. Yes, Bob. Do you want to use your microphone? Okay. Oh, you'll move them. Excellent. Anyone would like to second the minutes? Yep. Megan seconding. All in favour? Right. Anyone not in favour? Anyone against? Kia ora.
Just here if I said to execute.
Okay. Fair enough. Grab a seat. Sure. Okay. So moving on. I have not written a report for this particular meeting as chair, mainly because we've had the summer break through and a lot of the events and the research and everything just kind of stops at that point. So before the break, I did attend the GCP meeting that we're going to hear about in a bit. So I won't mention much about that one, but yeah. Thank you for all being here, and let's move on. So Ben. Oh.
Likewise, nothing too much with the executive director's report, so just a verbal update. A lot of the stuff happening in that space is on reports and papers this afternoon already. Just a heads up that there are some district plan reports going to council later on in February, just around timings. They couldn't come to this one and they can't go to the next one, but it's just some environment court processes and seeking some delegation for some stuff.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if verbal reports need to be moved or anything like that, Therese? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we do them both at the same time. So Deborah moving. Anyone like to second? Elizabeth? Sure. Yep. Okay, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Cool. Okay, go back to where I was at. Thank you for coming, Ben and Andrew.
Cool. Yeah, so the first up is a Greater Christchurch Partnership update. So the report here outlines some of the key topics that the partnership have been working on. We've got the endorsement of the spatial plan and the actions following that. We've got the joint housing action plan, various transport ones, monitoring, as well as priority development areas. I believe there was an update on the joint housing action plan at the last meeting in 2024. So phase one has been underway 2024. That was endorsed by council to undertake the work, and the summary of the outcome of that was presented and again summarised here in the paper. So the key bits on the phase one was that some of the most effective things that we have as council that we can look into is the property holdings that we have, the funding and financing tools that we have available, through loans, any changes to support community housing providers, and partnering and advocating that external space. So that's kind of where that phase one report got to. I'm not sure what the next step on that is.
So we're taking that whole action plan to a council briefing end of February, which will walk through each of those actions and implications of those, and engaging appetite from council on each of those type of things to inform a phase two or no phase two.
There's also work started on the monitoring of the spatial plan. So the team's been involved in that, and we're trying to mirror what the monitoring we're doing within Waikiriki Katua as well. So hopefully the work is complementary, and so that's progressing as well. There's a bunch of transport updates that I'll leave Andrew to talk to now.
Okay. So yeah, quite a few things going on in the sub-regional and regional space, obviously within Greater Christchurch, and also with the from a regional perspective. So looking at those, we've got PT Futures, MRT, the Regional Public Transport Plan, and the Greater Christchurch Transport Plan as being the main sort of areas that we've been working in, and you continue to work on. Obviously, we've had an issue with the funding decisions that have come out of NZTA that have not funded a lot of the things that we were wanting to see happen, particularly around PT Futures and public transport improvements, both in services and infrastructure. And from a Selwyn perspective, that really works to the we are wanting to increase those direct services from Rolleston and Lincoln, supported by future park and ride facilities and things like that. So unfortunately, that's just what we're all having to live with, that state of affairs now going forward. The other aspect is that there also has been quite a bit of work been going on in terms of how MRT for Greater Christchurch is going to sort of move forward. As you're probably aware, an indicative business case was agreed by the partnership. We basically had MRT proper within the city, between essentially Belfast and Hornby, with no MRT extending out to the districts, but enhanced public transport services and again infrastructure. As you'll hear later on in the day, we obviously have our view about what MRT should be for the district, or how it's important for the district, and particularly the ongoing growth to support Rolleston and our Greater Christchurch area. So, but as you can see in the report, the price tag on a detailed business case, just to look at the city component, is something like $53 million, which is horrendous when you think about it too closely. But it puts in context that to be able to get these things advanced, it's not a cheap and easy process. Somewhere down the line, when we start thinking about MRT proper for the districts, we're going to have to front up and try and work this through as well. And again, it's probably not going to be a cheap and easy exercise, but we are here to start planning and thinking ahead, which is the main thing at the moment. Other aspect, just quickly touch on, is the development of the Greater Christchurch Transport Plan. This supports the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. And there's been a lot of work going in over the last wee while in terms of getting that to a point where I think the partners are happy. Certainly the districts have been pushing for more rather than less in terms of what that plan should represent and the district's aspirations for future transport planning. Thank you.
The final element of the partnership work is around the priority development areas. So the team staff and Greater Christchurch staff as well have been working on what that means and how we can progress that. So the key for that is these are kind of catalyst areas to achieve the outcomes that was in the spatial plan, which is intensification around those transport corridors. And so, and the other part of the PDA that is important is that these are things that we need our partners to unlock for us to make these things happen. It's not just the work that we do generally. That those discussions happening, we need to figure out the scope of that and extent of that to progress that. So that could include changes to legislation that we need, prioritization of funding that we could ask for within these areas, or any other kind of private partnerships that we need them to help us with. So that's kind of the PDA's focus. And that is the Greater Christchurch update. Any questions?
Mark. I'm Mark, just saying.
So we'll go
And
Deborah
it's
first.
Raywin.
Deborah first, Elizabeth, then Bob.
Okay. I guess my questions is where it's sort of looking at the future of the Selwyn program update too, which is My Future Town. And then I read the Greater Christchurch Partnership update. And I have a question around, I guess it's the Eastern My Future Town versus the area plans for Ellesmere and Melbourne that are separate area plans, because the Eastern feeds into the Greater Christchurch Partnership. In reading this report, I noticed that most of the joint housing action plans have all been completed. So that's already built into the structure. And then we've also got, with regards to transport, which we have, we've got a plan for transport, which is for the eastern area, which is also fed into the Greater Christchurch, the GCP, okay? And then we have, staff have been exploring the potential to priority development areas for Rolleston and the potential actions for partners to help, right? That, and the MRT, that also feeds into. So my question is actually, for the eastern area, where there is not going to be an area plan, unlike Melbourne and unlike Ellesmere, the feedback that we're actually getting from the Eastern District with regards to My Future Towns, where is that information going to be directed? How is it going to make an incremental or be opportunity to change a plan through the GCP that I'm reading is already planned for?
The future Selwyn stuff, there is going to be an eastern area plan that it's a new plan because we don't have a current one. So the district will be covered by 3 area plans: the Melbourne, Ellesmere, and eastern area plans.
Mhm.
The interrelationship to the Greater Christchurch stuff is that the Greater Christchurch focuses on those sub-regional, the higher level things that are needed to connect across the TA boundaries in that regional context, whereas our eastern plan is trying to give it a bit more depth and add that kind of other stuff that doesn't necessarily flow through to the Greater Christchurch plans, a place to have a say. So when the transport stuff is looking at those MRT things and enhanced PT, there's also other transport elements that need to come through around the connection between our towns and things like that, and that's what the Eastern Area Plan will deliver. So and they are interrelated, and the trying to line up the processes is going to require us to juggle it really well. But so that's the goal, and that's why when I talked about the PDA, it was not that the focus is to deliver MRT. It's the focus is to on what the partners can unlock for us outside of the work that we are currently doing in our area plans. So it's not for the PDA to do the spatial work that the area plans are doing, but rather to figure out the bits that we can unlock through changes to legislation or changes to funding and things like that. So it's the additional things that we need from them rather than just the work we're doing.
And just to add to that, the phase 1 work was mostly investigation. It wasn't completing the entire joint housing action plan. So that's what we're going to be having a workshop on later on with council is, okay, we've got all this information now. What do we do next? So it's still an ongoing thing. Elizabeth.
Right. Well, my questions are a little more direct. What is being proposed / required to intensify housing around the MRT routes when they're already built up by existing private property ownership? So you've sort of just generically said we need some legislation changes, etc. But these are existing private property ownership. How are we looking to make advancement when that is clearly the biggest component and factor here?
Yeah, so at the moment, the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan has kind of like a generic arrow heading to Rolleston in terms of where, like saying, yes, it needs some kind of high level turn up and go mass rapid transit system. And to support the use of that, you need more people around it so that they have the opportunity, like they can use it more easily. The question is where that goes. And so that is a spatial question that will pop up in the area plan. The PDA is to say, well, actually, within that area, what challenges do we face in terms of unlocking that potential? There may be landowners around there that want to intensify because we are protecting the corridor and signaling that that's where our investment is going, but they may not be able to because there's covenants in the way or something like that. So we need to make sure that the legislation is changed to make that easier, and that's an example of how we could do it. So the goal of the spatial plan work is to sort of say where that could be going so people can understand the future of their town. And the PDA work is figuring out those mechanisms to help unlock that and make that easier.
And none of that's going to happen overnight. It's like, we're literally talking 20, 30, 50 years away.
Yeah.
So it's setting long-term aspirations.
So
goals.
ultimately, for this to occur, the developed systems and properties that we have at the moment, over time, property developers will need to be buying up singular sections and then building, is what we're saying.
Yes, and currently without having it signaled where it is, we don't get them doing it in the place that we want it, and so that's us trying to set that direction so that those things can happen.
Yeah, and some of these corridors that we're looking at and identifying, the development around them at the moment is what you would describe as low density. As Sophie said, 30, 50 years in time, housing stocks will get older. The economics of potentially doing something with them improves. I go back to the example of when we did the Rolleston Town Centre plan and we identified Tennyson Street for the town centre upgrade, and we had a row of houses along one side, and we said, wow, that's never going to change because it's not going to be economic to do anything. Lo and behold, we had a developer from Auckland come down, buy them all, bowl them, and now we've got a nice commercial or retail area there. So things can change fairly quickly.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, just on that joint housing and the affordable housing, has there been any work done with the Queenstown Council and the trust down there that are actually seem to have, I've been to a couple of sessions where they've discussed it, seems to work really well down there. So has any thought to that been put in the plan? It was an organisation that sold and rented and such like.
Yeah, so the Queenstown set up the inclusionary zoning policy that was explored as one of the actions there, Action 3. So that has been looked at and how that relates to the Greater Christchurch context, because Queenstown, Greater Christchurch is a little bit different. So and how effective that can be. So that has been completed as part of that broader presentation back to say this is something you can explore. This is the potential benefit or cost to you as a council. What do you want to undertake as phase 2? Yeah.
Thanks.
Megan.
So thanks, Bob, for that question, because what you've explained as the answer is that it's been considered from a planning framework, but actually with the Joint Housing Action Plan, it's looking at how another kind of housing trust kind of scenario works, which is, I think, what you're talking about, where you've got the owner, like a kind of more of a leasehold kind of arrangement. But anyway, that wasn't my question, but I am familiar with it, so I thought I'd just comment on it. So my question's about the priority development areas, but just to be really clear, I was an advisor into Greater Christchurch Partnership as a consultant for several years, but once I took this role on, I no longer, I ended that consultancy. So I don't believe there's a conflict and I'm comfortable commenting, but my question is about the priority development areas. It's good that we're going to be talking about what's right for this district to identify as priority development areas, but overall, has Mana Whenua indicated what they desire from priority development areas, and are we as council supporting Mana Whenua's aspirations that's been shared in those forums?
There was a specific Mana Whenua priority development area identified. That's probably in around Tuahuiri up there. And then the Great Christchurch work, the PDA stuff will have to feed back through the partnership structures to be part of that process as well. So there could be that, but there's probably not a specific goal that's coming through into our PDA, but that probably the scope of our PDA is not determined yet. So that once that is in place, there should be an opportunity when you take it back through the hierarchy of the partnership for that to be added to. Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, I did understand that there was going to be a desire to develop MR 873, which is out in Tuahiwi. Yep. But I'd also understood that there was a desire to develop kāinga nohoanga in the urban environments, which is where that aspiration would feed into potentially something that we might be looking at from Rolleston. Yeah,
the partnership has also got work underway in terms of a kāinga nohoanga strategy as a whole as well, and so that may lead to actions there, and then would have to try and feed that back into the specific PDA. But yeah, I guess it'd be probably worth us, once we understand the full kind of scope and extent of what we're looking at in Rolleston, to be able to kind of go back to the partnership and say, okay, here's how we've scoped it. How do you want to be involved in that? Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sam?
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. My contribution to this conversation is about whether the Greater Christchurch Partnership is the right vehicle for us to continue to be able to make great decisions for our communities. And just in the conversation over the last 10 minutes, I've heard many times the backwards and forwards between partners, or once we talk with all partners, or once we get in, it's a very slow process. And so I'd be interested, and it might not be the conversation that we have for today, but thinking how we might structure a conversation that means the next triennium, when we set up whatever partnership arrangements we're going to have with our neighbouring councils, we consider efficiency of decision making, we consider outcomes for local communities, we think about the regional structure that will serve us best moving forward, because I don't think that the GCP does that for us at the moment. It's slow, it's tardy, it results in the lowest common denominator being the loudest voice, and holds everything back rather than thinking about how we move forward. And as a district, Selwyn has always been thinking about the next thing and how we do things well. So I just highlight that as a conversation that I think this subcommittee needs to have, and maybe as a part of this report on the next agenda, when this comes through to the next meeting, there could be some consideration about or some time allowed for that level of conversation.
Just to add to that, Sam, as you're aware, there's a review being carried out by the Greater Christchurch Partnership. So there is a terms of reference scoping document going to the next one in March, is it? Next meeting? February? Which will actually look at what is in and out of scope for that particular review, with the results of that review going back to the Greater Christchurch Partnership Committee in July.
And that's great. And I think people in this committee need to be aware and on top of that discussion.
So thinking about that as a question, if there's a paper going to GCP, and I can't remember when the next meeting of this committee is it something that you would think we should be discussing here, or that the council should be discussing before you take the views of our district council to the partnership?
Next meeting's May.
We haven't seen what the paper's going to provide yet, so it's actually kind of hard to know what's going to be looked at, but I would expect at least this subcommittee should have eyes on it and opportunity to input into that before it goes to the full council, because I think it's important that the five of you there understand and well aware of its implications.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Deborah, did you have another question?
Oh no, oh sorry, I haven't seen the door.
Okay. Thank you very much. The only question I had down was around the action point 1 for the Joint Housing Action Plan and development of PDAs and stuff like that. So it's got on there potential partner site council sites mapped. Work is ongoing with Crack Lake. Is it when we have a workshop or when we discuss this more at council, are we likely to be able to, are we going to be able to see the map for our district of where we think we're going to put these houses?
I think the scoping of that action was to say, where does council own land? That was kind of it. There wasn't a where does council own land that we want to use for housing, and so it was just to and the goal of that was to see if there was bits that were near boundaries that could kind of have some, okay, if you've got a little bit there and I've got a little bit there, we can combine these to make something else out of it. So it was that level, and what I was really trying to clear when we were doing that action was like, am I putting things forward that we as council supports to be used for housing, or am I just putting everything forward as part of a discussion? So it was just everything was put forward so that you can see all of it alongside the context of all the other TAs to see if those cross-boundary issues or potential existed. Yes. And so if I think the phase 2 of that would be to, all right, we have stuff and we are wanting to use it for that, and we think there's benefit. That would be the next phase to pick that up and to sort of get that agreement and direction from council to go on specific sites.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Any other questions? No, okay. Would anyone like to move? Well, I'll happily move the report. Would anyone like to second? Yep, Bob, thank you very much. All in favour? Anyone against? No, excellent. Carried. Thank you. So we've got, next up we have Ben.
Yeah, so just quick run through on how we're going on Waikato to Future Selwyn and some of the key parts of that work program. As we signed that off late last year, here's like these the next kind of steps. So currently we're doing some engagement on our area plans. That's that early engagement, your future town, and that the kind of general question there is just tell us what you like, don't like, tell us everything you want to know or want us to know about your town. So the team have been out at events and out at community centres and running World Cafe and drop-ins events as well, and getting some really good engagement and having some really good discussions with people around the district. Broadly, that's to the goal there is to develop up 3 kind of options for our area plans to sort of take back and say, hey, this is what we've heard from you. You know, here's different potentials for our areas. It could go this way, this way, this way, and tell us what you think in that. And that's our engagement piece to get to formal consultation in 26. So part of the those option development, hopefully we can workshop them back here with you guys as a subcommittee and with council as well, working our way through that. So that's the engagement on the area plans. Alongside that is the monitoring for Future Selwyn. So we've kind of come out with some indicators to monitor the outcomes that we've got in there and getting the data for that and the process for that sorted. So hopefully we can get that all underway by June. And then we're just also looking at a set of work that is around how we get Future Selwyn embedded into the stuff that the council does. So how do we change some of the templates and the other council processes that matter, that, you know, we can show how it all links back to this overarching strategy that we have agreed to. So that's a quick summary. There's a work program update in there as well for your information too, or could be confusing. But any questions on how that all is going as well?
Well, I'll just say that I've been to 2 workshops and seen stuff out and about at various events, and it's actually been really interesting. I definitely appreciate for the area plan and the My Future Town work. Those maps are fantastic, and it's really good to see people sort of pointing out. Like it's much easier to discuss when you've got the pictures there right in front of you and somebody else to bounce ideas off, and that's really cool. My only disappointment so far is that only 6 people turned up at the Rolleston workshop, which was probably because it was at 2:00 on a Thursday afternoon. That said, I am informed that there's not been that many people asking for another workshop. So if people are happy with just doing the drop-ins and the events in this area, then perhaps that is simply the way that it is. But there's definitely been a lot of discussion around everything, and it was really interesting to see what other areas are doing. And there's still, if there's anybody listening, there's still some other workshops to go. Yeah, look forward to seeing what it all boils down into the reports and everything from there. Elizabeth.
Just wanting a heads up, how in depth do you expect the submission process, the engagement in 2026 to be on this?
Yeah, so that will be the formal kind of consultation on our preferred option. So that will be in-depth area plan, and we will be kind of running those formal consultation hearings, that kind of thing for that. It's important that it goes through that process to give it its standing that we need it to have. Yeah.
And obviously that'll be under a new council as well. So whether that changes any trajectories, who knows? And same with legislation, but
Yeah.
we can only do what we can do.
This is what we
And area plans.
So the area plans are those kind of putting on a map the things that the towns need, the first question we have is my future town. Tell us about your dreams and your future town and all the bits that you think it needs. And so that's the early engagement starting from there. And then we will take all that information and build up these 3 kind of options for people to kind of say, I like that element of that option, or I like that element of that option, to pull all these together to build our preferred option in that formal consultation in the early 26. Yeah.
Obviously in the newspaper, there's a huge indicator that we're going into the primary schools and we're getting the little kids to do the submissions on this. Is that usual protocol, and how much importance is it having primary school kids feeding into the final draft of the early engagement for My Future Town?
Yeah, so there was some work late last year going into some of the schools. They had their workbooks to go through, and that was to help them take it home and have discussions with their parents and their families, like about how it was working. Yeah, we went out to schools and got them to input into it, from people, kids suggesting tactile paving for things, more playgrounds, more activities for them to do during the day, kind of the shops and things that they want to see in the future. So all of those are all good ideas. They go alongside all the maps, that the online map tool that people can put into, all alongside all the drop-in information people are putting together, all the workshops that we're running and all the ideas there. So all of those ideas put into a big mixer, blender, and we'll just kind of come up with, okay, this is what you've said. Here's different ways we can put that on a map. What do you like from there?
I guess I have some concerns over that if we are putting all of those ideas in, that we could have 100 or 200, let's say we have 200 little under 10-year-old students and putting into the My Future Town and maybe 90 adults, that it could look like we want lots of Pizza Huts and giant bouncy castles, which could really give us a particular flavour for My Future Town rather than maybe what the ratepayers are actually wanting to see going forward.
So just to keep us moving on, that's unlikely to make it into a final plan. If somebody says that they'd like more retail areas, that's the sort of thing that would be like, okay, so where would we put retail areas? It doesn't come through quite as literally as I want a bouncy castle, we will put a bouncy castle in. And reality also bites when somebody goes, oh, I'd like a water park. People have been wanting a water park for ages. That doesn't mean we will ever be able to afford one or that we actually need one. So that's where part of the consultation and the drilling into viable options will come through. So Deborah.
Thank you. And I actually appreciate the engagement with the school children to go home. It's a different way of actually engaging with the adults and encouraging them to be at the beginning of the process. And I likened it to being, it's important when you're looking at planning that you're on the bus at the beginning of the journey, and you learn how the journey actually feeds through to other policies, statements and planning, so you don't get a surprise when somebody or a neighbour wants to do something that, you might feel that you haven't had an opportunity to participate in because the way the legislation is built up. So I appreciate the way that you've staff have actually gone out and done the engagement. I understand that you're talking to community committees. There's someone going around community committees and actually engaging at community committees. I guess I'm just a little bit apprehensive about the rural community, because if you look at My Future Town, a lot of people in the rural community see it as a town. They don't see, well, where's the rural aspect? Where's my ability to farm? Reverse sensitivity, things that are going to affect them. And another one is, how do I suffer from potable value, with regards to all the land being rezoned around me, and I can't rezone, yet my valuations are going up and it's impacting on my rates. There are, and these issues do need explaining clearly to our community about the wider issues that, of how things can be influenced, and we can manage those sorts of processes, because that's what I'm finding is some of the questions bus parking questions that are coming out aren't necessarily the planning ones, but it's futuristic about how do they impact on my rates. But so far to date, thanks for picking up the requests of actually trying to engage, because it is an online workshop. You've got to book, and not everybody has Facebook, unfortunately. And it's important that we actually do consider the different timeframes when the rural community may be milking cows at 5 or 6 o'clock.
Yeah, there are those events that you need to sign up for so we can manage the table numbers. But there's also just the drop-ins that we've been running during the week and some weeknights and weekends in the towns, key towns. There is a specific rural workshop that we've set up that we're trying to get people to come along to as well. And even like last night at Lincoln, there were people that were not from a town, they were in the rural area, and they were providing that kind of feedback as well. So, and again, it's the early engagement. We've got a few opportunities along the way, and we'll keep learning from how people are finding out about things and how they are connecting and engaging on it. We need to learn about what bits are working as well. So it's been going well, and hopefully the next stage we can learn from that and do better.
And yeah, there's lots of time and lots of iterations and probably a whole bunch of lessons as we move forward through. So that's great. Bob.
Yeah. Just with the Melbourne meeting the other night, I had quite a bit of feedback from people who stood around afterwards, and they were very impressed with it, and they feel that they were inclusive, and I think the staff did really well at presenting it. So I think it's probably a lesson for us in the future of the way that we could do things. But the one thing that was said afterwards, sometimes with council, we go through all this and then that's the end of it. We don't hear any more. So I think the big thing is to actually still carry the people along for the rest of the journey and not have gaps, big gaps.
Yeah, so the people that have engaged, they will get that summary back, and then hopefully they will continue in that engagement in August, and then ultimately in the 26th when we've got that formal consultation. Yeah.
Nice. Megan or Sam, any questions?
No.
Okay, cool. Okay, so anyone would like to move this report? Deborah, second? I'll second it. All in favour? Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. Anyone against? No? Excellent. All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. And now we've got Michelle. Thank you very much for your work on the submission, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, ko Michelle Flay tōku ingoa. So council staff have prepared a submission on the resource management, consenting and other system changes bill. So this bill is the second RMA amendment bill as part of phase 2 of the government's resource management reform. The bill seeks to make a variety of changes to the Act, and those changes have been grouped under 5 buckets. So we've got the infrastructure and energy, housing growth, farming and primary sector, natural hazards and emergencies, and system improvements. So you would have received an email on the 21st of January seeking your input and suggested content for the submission. And I have actioned, so in the attached report, there are a few things still outstanding that were suggested by Councillor McInnes. So in terms of the options to endorse the submission, I think in the report it says option 1 is recommended. However, there are those 2 outstanding suggested changes. So just to go through the additional outstanding changes. Councillor McInnes has suggested that we seek changes to the definition for long-lived infrastructure to include waterworks, water races and land drainage. So we've suggested a new paragraph be added to that. And also looking to include details on the review of the Selwyn District Plan. So have a little bit more local context there, and looking to add those into paragraph 18. So. Yes.
And yet the thing about the water was, it seemed quite strange to describe several varieties of very long-lived infrastructure, but not to have anything about water, which I know is covered by a whole bunch of other legislation, but it seemed like a bit of an omission to, I don't know whether they take it on us. And when we were describing the investment that local communities have made preparing, documents like a district plan, that we then have to constantly amend. It is an ongoing extreme expense that falls on our ratepayers. So anyway, thank you very much for your work on those. And I don't know how many others. I know Deborah sent some suggestions through. We have a whole bunch of questions, and I've lost track of. So I think the one with chairman is Bob. No,
I know you're chairman.
no, I'm down as
I'm
Nicole.
chairman.
You're chairman.
I'm
Okay.
chairman.
Right. I should have been watching as the
I think
lights
I'm
went
Gary.
on. Okay, and who is Mark and who is Gary?
I'm Mark.
I'm Gary. No,
You're Gary. I'm Mark.
Very confusing. Okay, so we'll go Deborah, Megan, and then Elizabeth.
Madam Chair, just with regards to your submission part with regards to living waters, and you're talking about land drainage. We as a council, we have the operational responsibility for land drainage. The compliance issue or the planning issues for water and land drainage fall under Environment Canterbury. And you'll see the farming and primary sector in 26 of the submission says the proposed changes relating to the farming and primary sector relate to consenting functions administered by regional authorities. So I just want to clarify that I don't think that that's our role. It's regional council's role, because we only have an operational responsibility with regards to the consenting process. That's for all the land drainage schemes that are coming under being. So I just wondered for clarification, where are we sitting with the suggested chair's recommendation in that particular sector?
Yes, so it's just with respect to amending the definition of long-lived infrastructure. And we could potentially include something a little bit broader, like local government infrastructure. So I guess it's important to define, we're talking about, those council assets that have a particular lifespan, anticipated lifespan of, 30 years, say. So, just including a definition for clarity on that, and to make sure it's consistent across national direction and different pieces of legislation could be of benefit not only to the regional council, but it could potentially be beneficial to us.
Yeah, and I when I was writing my wee suggestion, I linked it back to the Local Government Act, or both of them, the 1974 and 2002, because they both define waterworks, land drainage, and that sort of thing, specific to the ones that are owned or under the management of a CCO or that sort of thing. So it's the ones, just the infrastructure that is, my intention was to suggest just the infrastructure that is under local authority control or a CCO, or, with relation to other legislation, not trying to come up with a whole new definition.
I guess the difficulty there is in some of our schemes, not so much where the land drainage, the designated land drainage schemes are not waterways, because many have a dual purpose with regards to the streams and cracks as part of the integral part of the management, which could fall under Environment Canterbury or regional. It's actually a complicated area probably to get a definition, because you've also got ephemeral drains, which occur on farming properties, and they're intermittent. So they only fill up in wet weather and then feed in, but they're not classed as part of the drainage system, and they're quite often private. You know, I mean, the designated drains the only ones that would fall into a designated drainage system in our catchment are those that are under the 1962 refining boundary of the land drainage schemes. And we don't manage the Hallswell scheme and Ladbrokes and around that. That's Environment Canterbury. So that's why I just wanted to clarify with regards to, you know, having a definition. It will fall under Environment Canterbury as the priority or the lead partner compared to district plans, because we cannot be inconsistent with.
Really, the legislation will cover everywhere, not just Selwyn. It's just about having that included in a definition of long-lived infrastructure. And yes, it is complicated. Megan.
Kia ora. This is a really well-written submission, and so I read it and read through it and compared it to what my position would be on some of these issues, and I felt that it hits the mark on almost everything. So I don't have any feedback to provide other than to say it's a really good submission. But I do have a question, and I can't find it in here. I think it's paragraph 25. But I recall reading somewhere about having a streamlined process to remove heritage buildings.
Yeah, 23.
23, okay,
23.
right, 23
Yeah.
to 25. And so when I look at our list of heritage buildings, like we've got 431 protected on our district plan, and to go through that process does cost quite a lot of time for council. And I want to know, should we be more personalising this by adding in the cost that's already been undertaken, quite similar to what you had suggested already, Sophie, about finding ways to personalise it and say, we've already gone through really detailed processes that's cost a lot of money to identify that the community's been involved in. But then again, at the same time, you do want to keep it quite high level. So it's about now picking and choosing which examples to use and which will hit the point.
Yes, so just to provide a wee bit of context on the heritage components of the bill, this is the proposal is obviously in relation to the Gordon Wilson Flats situation in Wellington, where the council struggled to provide the sufficient information to be able to delist that set of flats. So what they're proposing, what the government is proposing, is a more streamlined process whereby the council, if the council decides it's appropriate to delist something, there is a clear procedure set out as to how they go about doing that. So it has a very narrow it's a very narrow response to one particular situation, and the proposal is it puts the council in the driver's seat really, to be able to make that application should they want to, and I'm happy to go away and see if we can find any relevant Selwyn context around how much that may have cost or the process.
Yeah, we could go for a deep dive into our accounts, but largely a lot of that comes out of centralised pot type things where we'd have to look at individual invoices from historic things for the DPR thing. So whatever we get out of that wouldn't be ultimately reliable. So whether you
No, I guess I maybe I'd have misunderstood it then, because what I had understood was taking away community voice. So it was bringing in a streamlined process. That means that the community won't be participating. And to me, that seemed to go. If we're delisting things that the community's already worked really hard to list, it's good to have a streamlined process. But are we supporting the streamlined process for heritage removal?
I think what we're trying to say is that we're taking a mallet to a needle. Yeah. Yes, unnecessary. And probably will have limited overall benefit or system improvement, which is what the intention of the bill is. So, yeah, the benefit is minimal.
That's probably enough to say then.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I guess a lot of my question really has been answered there from what Megan's just gone through. I haven't read the original bill, so I'm only looking at your notes and what your submission is to try and pick out the direction of where the bill is at. But there was some talk about the public's ability to have hearings and redress on some of the topics. And like Megan said, you know, that's a prime example with heritage. If the community's worked really hard for something or we're in the process of something, then that ability for the public to be bypassed. Do you feel that your submission really gives effect to that, that the public still have a right? And do you feel that we're clear on that? And I just want to ascertain where we are sitting with that, because while we don't want unnecessary court cases, the reality is, to be a democratic society, we still have to allow people that option to oppose or to appeal something if they feel that we're in the wrong. And let's be honest, we sometimes are. That includes for, you know, land use, heritage, in any area potentially.
Yes, so I guess this is the council's submission, and I think we're quite clear that you know, any benefit with the proposal in terms of you know, system efficiencies is going to be really minimal, and we are not supportive of you know, removing opportunity for council you know, to seek the views of interested parties in the hearing process and narrowing those rights. There is minimal benefit with doing that, because there's very few percentage of resource consents that even go to hearing, and does open new litigation risk in terms of council actually making the decision that it holds sufficient information. Yeah, so I think
Basically, we actually increase our litigation potential, is what you're saying?
risk, yes.
Yeah.
And we're not supportive of that.
Thank you very much. Bob, do you want to think? No? Oh, Sam, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. My contribution is just around presenting the submission and asking to be heard orally on it, and whether you as chairman would like to do that presentation, or I'm happy to support.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Guess we'll find out what the days, when it is, and work it out from there. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Submissions close on the 10th of February.
So thank you very much. I'm aware there's a really short time frame, but it's good to have been able to discuss this here rather than just doing it by mail. So hopefully we haven't. I don't think we've given you anything else. It's more just it's been mostly clarifying, isn't it? So that's good. Thank you. Okay, so we have our motion. Sorry, go backwards. Okay. So we've got three options. One is to receive and endorse the submission as it stands. Option 2 is endorse the submission pending any suggested changes. Don't think we want to go to option 3, which is not support the submission, but is option 2 okay? Because we've added, well, mostly me, but added a couple of extra things to add in there, but I'm happy with however you choose to word those. So if we get the recommendation be A, we receive the report, and B, endorse the submission pending any suggested changes. Yep, you'll move that. Thank you very much. Anyone to second it? Elizabeth. So Bob moving, Elizabeth seconding. All in favour? Right. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you very, very much, Michelle. Okay. So that's the end of the public part of the meeting. So I'll do closing karakia. Unuhia, te pau, kia wātia, ai kua wātia. Excellent. And thank you.